Hello and welcome to the first in a series of training videos about using KellyDown. In this video I'm going to show you how to start KellyDown and then describe many of the features of the KellyDown user interface. Double-click on the KellyDown icon on your Windows desktop to start KellyDown. If this is the first time you have run KellyDown on this computer, you will be presented with a message informing you that you do not have a KellyDown license. KellyDown will continue to run in limited evaluation mode for 7 days without a license. The limited evaluation mode allows you to perform all the functions of KellyDown on the example database except create new proposals and surveys. Follow the instructions shown on the screen to apply for a fully functional evaluation license, or the permanent license if you have already purchased one. Next, KellyDown will prompt you to enter a password for the example database. Many customers insist that their data is protected using a password, but if you prefer not to have to enter a password every time you start KellyDown, you can switch this option off. Enter a password hint to remind you of the password and click on the Continue button to open the example database. You are reminded that the example database has not been backed up recently. Click on the OK button to continue opening the database. The KellyDown screen comprises several main components. The menu bar contains drop-down menus that provide access to all of the modules and functions in KellyDown. The order of the menus in KellyDown is always File, Edit, View, Insert, etc. The top-level menus always contain familiar items. For example, the File menu always contains the Open, Save and Exit items. The Toolbar menu is immediately below the menu bar and provides shortcuts to functions that you use most often. For example, if you routinely view survey reports, instead of selecting View Report Survey from the menu bar, simply click on the Survey Report button on the toolbar. Hover the mouse over a button to see its function in a tooltip. The toolbar on the main KellyDown screen is configurable, so you can change the buttons that are displayed depending on the functions you use most often. Simply right-click on any of the buttons and select or unselect the buttons you want to be shown on the toolbar. Immediately below the toolbar is the reference bar, which consists of 5 buttons, each one representing a level in the hierarchy from the current proposal or survey back up to the folder level. You may click on any one of these buttons to select that level. The corresponding node is highlighted in the Database Explorer. Right-click on a button to display a pop-up menu from which you may select one of the menu items associated with that particular level. For example, right-click on the Structure button to edit the structure properties, add a new well, or delete the structure. As you work in different parts of the application, the menus and toolbars continually update so they always relate to the task at hand. Because you are able to work on several modules at one time in KellyDown, the menus and toolbar buttons change as you switch between each one. We call this effect switching focus from one module to another. For example, we can work on survey data and open the casing program editor for that survey, and then also open a graphics display of the casing program. You can keep each one of these windows open and switch between each one or change focus from one module to the other, and the menus will change accordingly. The status bar at the bottom of the KellyDown screen shows informational messages at the left when KellyDown is busy. At the right are shown 5 panels indicating the north reference, units of length and diameter, and the vertical and horizontal reference origins. We'll discuss these later. Red text in any of these panels indicates that the corresponding reference is not the preferred reference. The Database Explorer is the main method of navigating between the different projects, structures, wells and profiles, etc. in the KellyDown database. The Database Explorer is always visible on the left side of the KellyDown screen. When you resize the KellyDown screen, the height of the Database Explorer expands and shrinks accordingly. The different entities shown in the Database Explorer are referred to as nodes. Click on the plus symbol next to a node to view the subnodes below it, and click on the minus symbol to close the node again. We refer to the relationship between the nodes as either parents or children. A well is the child of the structure it belongs to. A structure is the parent of all the wells underneath it. In the case of profiles where one survey is tied onto another, we refer to the shallower survey as the parent and the deeper survey as the child. Each of the nodes in the Database Explorer shows the ID of that particular entity. Hover the mouse over a node to expose a tooltip showing the corresponding name of the entity, and in the case of a profile, the tooltip shows its wellbore name and profile name. Click on the ID of a node to expand the node down to the last accessed profile for that node. This feature allows you to easily switch between projects, because by clicking on a folder or project, the node will immediately expand the path down to the last proposal or survey you accessed in that folder or project. Whenever KellyDown closes, it records the location in the database where you last worked, and opens to that same location the next time you work in that database. If there are too many nodes to fit inside the Database Explorer window, use the scroll bar on the right-hand side to bring other nodes into view. The checkboxes next to each node are used to select profiles that will be included in some of the KellyDown modules that require access to several profiles at one time. For example, the Visualizer module and the Anti-Collision module, where all the checked profiles are scanned for proximity against the reference profile. It is not necessary to select every profile individually. You can select all the profiles in a project simply by checking the box next to the project node. Similarly, you may select all the profiles belonging to two structures by checking the boxes for the two structures in question. Hold down the keyboard Control key and click on a node to uncheck every node except the one you are working on and its children. Use this function if you have a multi-project database where you only want to export data belonging to, say, the current project or the current well, for example. If you expand several nodes so the Database Explorer looks very busy, press the F5 key to refresh it or select the View Refresh Database Explorer menu. You can only collapse nodes where all of the child nodes are either checked or unchecked. KellyDown keeps track of which nodes are checked and which are not, so if a node is collapsed, KellyDown knows that all the nodes below that one are either checked or unchecked, depending on the status of the parent node. Many of the menus found on the main KellyDown menu and on the toolbars are also accessible from the Database Explorer. Just right-click on a node and select the appropriate function from the pop-up menu. For example, to add a new folder to the database, right-click on the database node and select Add New Folder from the pop-up menu. The pop-up menus change depending on which node is selected. For example, when a project node is selected, the pop-up menu has an option to edit lease lines associated with the project. When a structure node is selected, the pop-up menu has options to edit section lines associated with the structure, edit slot coordinates, and locate the project center at the structure location. When a well node is selected, the pop-up menu has options to edit the hard lines, add new proposals and surveys, and locate the structure center at the well location. The proposal and survey nodes give you access to many of the editing functions associated with profiles, including making the current profile active or inactive, access to the survey data, slide sheet, targets, casing, survey tools, formation tops, comments, and engineering modules. The Database Explorer is disabled when you work on individual modules, for example, the Proposal Editor, Survey Editor, and Slide Sheet Editor. This prevents you from switching to a different node in the database where doing so would cause unpredictable or even disastrous results. If, for example, you were working on one survey dataset, you wouldn't want the database pointer to move to a different well in a different project, because it would become unclear which survey the data belonged to. Consequently, although the main menu and toolbar are displayed when you click on the Database Explorer, all the menus and toolbar buttons except the Windows and Help menus are disabled when working in a particular module. Below the Database Explorer is the Data Reference Panel, which is used to switch between different vertical and horizontal origins, between True North and Grid North, and to select a different unit system. In KellyDown you can easily switch between any of these references with a click of a button, but of course there are safeguards in place to make sure you don't inadvertently use an incorrect reference in reports or plots, for example. The vertical and horizontal origins are the origins from which coordinate data and vertical depths are referenced, particularly when viewing the data in spreadsheet modules like the survey editor or when printing reports. We'll look at the vertical origin first and consider the survey editor as an example. With the vertical origin set at the well level, you can see in the survey editor that the vertical depth originates at 0, which is the wellhead. The status bar at the bottom right shows us that the origin is the RKB. If we change the vertical origin to global, notice that the survey vertical depth now starts at a different value, usually a negative number, because the well is some distance above the global vertical origin, which is typically mean sea level. Notice also that the vertical origin label on the status bar now reads mean sea level and is coloured red. The actual text, mean sea level, is defined by the user at the folder level. It is coloured red because it is not the preferred vertical origin for printing reports. This option is set under System Settings, which we will discuss later. With the horizontal origin set at the well level, notice that in the survey editor the northing and easting coordinates originate at 0, which is the wellhead. Change the horizontal origin to global in the data reference panel and notice that the northings and eastings now start with a large number. These are the map coordinates of the well. All the survey data is now referenced to mean sea level and map coordinates are shown in red on the status bar. You can also set the vertical and horizontal origins to the project or the structure, thereby allowing you to define up to 4 datums for vertical depths and 4 origins for horizontal coordinates. These can also be easily updated if you need to define additional datums or origins. When calculating the survey coordinates, KellyDown adds the offsets from each level back to the origin to be displayed. For example, consider a survey that has a vertical depth of 100 meters relative to the wellhead. When displaying this survey relative to the global origin, KellyDown adds the well elevation, structure elevation, and project elevation to the survey's vertical depth. Similarly, when displaying the survey coordinates, KellyDown adds the well offsets, structure offsets, and project offsets to the global coordinates to display the survey, northing, and eastings as map coordinates. By selecting any of the vertical or horizontal origins in the data reference panel, you may view and enter survey data relative to any of the predefined origins. Notice that when the global or project origin is selected, the north reference in the data reference panel is set to grid north and the true north option is disabled. This is because at the global horizontal origin and project origin, directions are always relative to grid north. The true north reference is only applicable for local coordinates, since the curvature of the Earth drastically reduces the accuracy of true north coordinates over large distances. Map coordinates are therefore always relative to grid north. When we set the vertical and horizontal origins back to well, notice that the origins start at 0 again, and the true north option is once again enabled. Change the north reference to true north, and notice that the survey azimuths and local coordinates change. It may be obvious why the azimuths change, but not quite so obvious why the northings and easting coordinates change, since the survey is in the same location in the real world. It is actually the reference that has changed. The first box on the status bar at the bottom right always shows the current north reference, and when it is coloured red, it means that the reference is not the preferred reference set under System Settings. The last item on the data reference panel is the unit system selector. Let's open up the casing editor as well, so we can view units other than just lengths. When we change the unit system to SI metric, notice that almost all of the data in the survey editor and the casing editor changes to the new units. The column headers also change to reflect the new units, and the 2 boxes on the status bar change to reflect the length and diameter units. They are also coloured red because in our example, feet and inches are the preferred units, not meters and millimeters. The unit system and north reference you select in the data reference panel remain in effect only until you change to a node in a different project, at which time the units revert to the default set at the project level, and the north reference reverts to the default set at the structure level. The vertical and horizontal origins remain in effect while you are working in the current project. When you switch to a different project, the vertical and horizontal origins will switch to the one set in the project. When you switch back to the current project, they revert back to the ones that were last set for that project. As already mentioned, if the reference origins, north reference, or units are not set to the preferred ones as defined in system settings, the corresponding labels on the status bar are colored red, and if you attempt to produce a report or plot while these references are not the preferred ones, a warning message pops up to warn you. Notice that when you do click on any of the reference controls in the Data Reference panel, focus switches to the Database Explorer window, and consequently the menu and toolbar associated with the module you're working in lose focus and are disabled, so you need to direct focus back to the module in which you are working before you can continue editing the data or use any of its associated menus or toolbar buttons. As you can see, there are several methods of launching the same modules in the KellyDown application. To edit the structure properties, for example, you can right-click on the structure node in the Database Explorer, or right-click on the structure button on the reference bar and select Structure Properties from the pop-up menu. You can select Structure Properties from the main Edit menu, or you can click on the Structure Properties button on the toolbar when the structure is selected in the Database Explorer. In actual fact, you can also double-click on the structure node itself in the Database Explorer to launch the Structure Properties dialog. There are two types of edits you can perform on data in KellyDown: text edits and numerical edits. The KellyDown text editor has several functions that are not immediately obvious. Several fields in the KellyDown database are limited to a certain number of characters. For example, all IDs are limited to 20 characters and names are limited to 50 characters. If you try to enter more characters than are allowed, you will hear an audible beep and you will be prevented from entering more characters. You may sometimes find that after entering a large amount of text that the caps lock button was depressed and you need to retype the text in the proper case. This isn't necessary. Just press the Ctrl+T key combination to convert the characters to title case, where the first letter of every word is capitalized. You can also press Ctrl+U to convert the text to uppercase, Ctrl+L to convert the text to lowercase, or Ctrl+S to convert the text to sentence case, where the beginning of each sentence is capitalized. If you select just a few characters in the text, the effect is applied to only those characters. Notes fields and comments fields also contain a built-in spell checker. If you misspell a word, it is highlighted with a red squiggly line beneath it. Right-click on the highlighted word to see a list of the possible options. Choose one of the words with the correct spelling, or click on Add to Dictionary if the highlighted word actually is a proper word that the dictionary just didn't recognize. Click on Spell to bring up the spell dialog where you will find additional options. The KellyDown numerical editor is quite sophisticated. Its function changes depending on which type of field you are editing. As far as possible, it will only allow you to enter numbers that are within a valid range. For example, you are only able to enter inclination values that are within the range from 0 to 180 degrees. Inclination values outside of this range are invalid. All lengths and diameter values are entered in the units shown on the status bar. Other values are entered in the unit shown against the entry field itself, or in the case of spreadsheets, in the unit shown in the column header. The values are converted to SI units, for example meters for lengths and diameters, before being stored in the database. You are also prevented from entering illegal characters into numeric fields. Normal numeric fields accept only numerical characters. Northing fields accept numerical characters plus the N and S characters. You may enter northings as positive or negative numbers, or as values followed by an N or an S to indicate north or south. They are converted and displayed in the preferred format when you tab to the next field. Easting fields accept numeric characters plus the E and W characters to indicate east or west. Inclinations and directions may be entered as decimal degrees or degrees, minutes and seconds, separated by spaces. Directions may be entered as azimuths, i.e. 0 to 360 degrees, or as quadrants. Geographical coordinate fields handle values entered in decimal degrees or in degrees, minutes and seconds, with the degrees, minutes and seconds separated by a space. They may be entered as either positive or negative values, or with an appended N, E, S or W to indicate the direction. When you tab off the field, the value is formatted according to the format specified under the Tools Options menu under the Display Options tab. Lengths, including depths, etc., may be entered as feet or meters, irrespective of the current length units, by appending an F or an M to the value. For example, 1000 m is interpreted as 1000 meters, even when the default units are in feet. Diameters may be entered as inches, irrespective of the current diameter units, by appending a double quote character to the value. For example, 10 followed by double quotes is interpreted as 10 inches, even if the default diameter units are millimeters. Times and hours may be entered as decimal hours or as hours and minutes separated by a space. Additionally, times may be entered simply as hours and minutes without a space. For example, 930 is interpreted as a time of 9:30. The formatting of numbers is handled in the units editor, which is discussed later. KellyDown allows all values to be displayed in just about any possible unit and format. You may choose to display numbers with or without a thousandths separator, and with any number of decimal places, and you may even add your own units if necessary. For example, lengths may be shown in meters, feet, or US feet, but you may also add furlongs if you wished. The method of entering information into KellyDown is mostly through either dialogues or spreadsheets. Dialog boxes are used mainly to enter a single record into the KellyDown database, for example, information about a single well or a single target. Spreadsheets are used to enter a collection of records, for example, survey records, slide records, or casing records. While you edit information in a dialog or in a spreadsheet, the Database Explorer is disabled, and clicking on it causes the main KellyDown menus and toolbars to be displayed, but they are disabled. This effect is deliberate, to prevent you from changing to another project in the database while you are editing the information in the current one. Dialogs have a consistent look. The title bar shows the type of entity being edited. Immediately below the title bar are the ID and the name of the entity. The ID is a short form of the name and is used to identify the entity within the KellyDown application itself. Its length is limited to 20 characters. The ID of an entity is displayed in the Database Explorer and in the data reference bar at the top of the main KellyDown screen. The ID is unique for all entities under its parent entity. For example, a structure may contain only one well that has an ID of well number 1. And a well may contain only one proposal that has an ID of design number 1. The name may contain up to 50 characters and is the real-world name of the entity. The name is printed on reports and plots. It does not need to be unique, so a structure may have more than one well whose name is well number 1, although this is generally not recommended. Quite often the name is less than 20 characters in length, and therefore the same as the ID, so KellyDown automatically copies the ID to the name field when you tab off the ID field, if the name field is empty, or the same as the original ID field. The ID and name fields are mandatory fields and must contain valid text. If you tab off either of those fields without entering information, you will be presented with a warning message and directed back to that entry field. The only way of closing the dialog without entering text into these fields is to click on the dialog's cancel button. Most dialogs consist of one or more tabbed pages. Click on the tab at the top of the dialog to access the information contained on that page. The last tab usually contains a notes field where the user may enter supplementary information. This information is used purely as a reminder to you or anybody else who uses the database about actions that have been performed on the particular entity. For example, a customer may move a target from its original position. It is good practice to make a note of what changes were made, when they were made, and who instructed you to make the change. There is no limit to the quantity of text that a notes field may contain. When a note has been added to a particular entity, a map pin icon is displayed on the tab itself, so you can easily recognize if a note has been added. Almost all records in the KellyDown database include audit information consisting of the date the record was created, the date it was last updated, and the ID of the user who last updated it. Hover the mouse cursor over the Update User ID to view the actual name of the user who last edited the data. In some dialogs you have the option of entering coordinates relative to a number of different origins. This differs from a spreadsheet interface where you select the current vertical or horizontal origin using the Data Reference panel. In the case of a target, you have the option of entering the target coordinates as either geographic coordinates, map coordinates, offsets from the project, offsets from the structure, or offsets from the well. This may seem a little daunting at first, but it is really quite straightforward. The origin is displayed above each column, i.e. global origin, project origin, etc. And the type of coordinate is displayed at the left, i.e. vertical depth, northings or eastings. You may view the actual origin names by hovering the mouse cursor over each of the entry fields. For example, hover the mouse over the northings relative to the structure origin to see that the target northings are relative to AA pad. The actual naming of the origins is discussed later. If you are provided with target vertical depths relative to mean sea level and target offsets relative to the wellhead, enter the vertical depth under the first column and the horizontal offsets under the fourth column. As you tab off each field, the associated fields are updated automatically. Above each column you will see the north reference. If the local north reference is set to true north, it is shown above the structure and well coordinate columns. And if the north reference does not comply with the preferred north reference set in system settings, it is highlighted in red to bring it to your attention. An additional option set at the project level allows you to always show global coordinates in meters, even when the units are set to feet. In this case, the global origin label above the first column is colored blue, and a message is displayed in blue at the bottom of the dialog box to remind you that the map coordinates are shown in meters and not feet. Spreadsheets are used to enter collections of information such as survey data, casing sections, or formation tops, etc. The title bar shows the data set being edited, followed by a minimize button, a maximize button, and a close button. If you click on the minimize button, the spreadsheet is minimized and may become hidden behind the Database Explorer. If it does, use the Control plus Tab key combination to cycle through the open windows in the KellyDown application until the minimize window appears, and you can then restore it to its original size and position. Alternatively, you may select the window from the Windows menu, which will bring it back into view. The Maximize button will expand the window so it fills the full area inside the KellyDown application window. Click on the Restore button to restore it to its original size. Pressing the F11 key or selecting the Windows Dock menu will cause the spreadsheet to fill the available space to the right of the Database Explorer. Hold down the Control key and click on the F11 key to dock the spreadsheet inside the whole of the KellyDown workspace. Spreadsheets consist of columns of data that run from the top of the spreadsheet to the bottom and rows that run across the spreadsheet. The individual entry fields in the spreadsheet are referred to as cells. Some spreadsheets restrict you to entering information in only certain columns or cells. The other columns or cells are for display purposes only. For example, in the Survey Editor spreadsheet, you can enter measure depths, inclinations, and azimuth values. The other columns display calculated values such as the vertical depth and coordinates, etc. So you can't enter data into these cells. Some spreadsheets, such as the Survey Editor spreadsheet, even prevent you from clicking on the read-only cells. This is done so the Tab key automatically skips to the next line once you have entered columns of information that are required. This aids typing by letting you tab from one editable field to another as you type. To add new information into the spreadsheet, simply continue to type on the bottom row, which automatically adds a new record. Note: none of the modifications or additions you make to the data in a spreadsheet are saved to the database until you either save the data by using the File Save menu or close the spreadsheet and answer yes when KellyDown asks you if you want to save the modifications. The column headers display the type of information to be entered in the column, or the type of information displayed in the column followed by the units of measurement in brackets. The data is referenced to the origins and north reference displayed on the status bar at the bottom of the KellyDown screen. You can change the units, north reference and vertical and horizontal origins at any time while the data is displayed in the spreadsheet, and it is instantly updated to the new reference. Additionally, you may enter information relative to whatever reference is in effect. KellyDown keeps track of the reference and stores the data appropriately if and when it is saved to the database. Modifications you make to the data in a spreadsheet are identified by a green-colored marker indicating a new row or an amber-colored marker indicating a modified row to the right of the row label. These markers remain visible until you save the modifications to the database, allowing you to easily see what data has been added or changed during the current editing session, but not yet saved to the database. If any of the columns in the spreadsheet contain information that exceeds a predefined tolerance, the status marker is colored red, so you can quickly scroll across to the offending data even if that column isn't presently in view. For example, if survey data diverges too far away from the associated well plan. The various functions you can perform on the data are accessed via the menus or via toolbar buttons. Additionally, pop-up menus provide access to functions that are specific to individual rows or columns. For example, select some rows in the Survey Editor and click on a row. A pop-up menu displays functions you can perform on the data. Almost all the spreadsheets allow you to modify the columns of data that are displayed in the spreadsheet. Right-click on any of the column headers to present a pop-up menu that allows you to customize the columns. The Columns Editor is divided into two halves. The panel on the right lists the columns that are currently selected in the associated spreadsheet, and the panel on the left shows additional columns that are available. Select any of the additional columns on the left and click on the Add button to move them to the Selected Fields panel, or move all the columns to the Selected Fields panel by clicking on the Add All button. Remove fields from the Selected Fields panel in the same manner by clicking on the Remove or Remove All button. Use the standard key combinations to select more than one column at a time. For example, use the Shift key to select a contiguous group of columns, or the Control key to select individual columns. You may simply double-click on a field in the Available Fields panel to move it to the Selected Fields panel, or double-click on a field in the Selected Fields panel to remove it from the list. Once you have moved the desired fields to the Selected Fields panel, select one or more of them and click on the Move Up or Move Down button to position them exactly as you wish. Hold down the Control key while clicking on the Move Up or Move Down button to move the selected column or columns 10 positions at a time. Click on the Set Default Columns button to revert to the factory settings list of columns. When you are happy with the selected fields and their order, click on the OK button to return to the spreadsheet and notice that the additional columns have been added. Click the Cancel button to return to the spreadsheet without changing the columns. If the columns you selected in the Columns Editor don't appear in the spreadsheet, it may be because information in those columns isn't relevant. For example, columns about the associated well plan aren't shown if a well plan hasn't been associated with the current survey under Survey Properties. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.